Price stability is theft. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Heresy Financial. My name is Joe Brown, and today in this video, I'm going to explain and describe exactly how and why price stability is theft. And if you don't know why I'm saying price stability, it's because the Federal Reserve is mandated by Congress. They've got two mandates: full employment and price stability. And so what they do is they manipulate the supply of money in order to try and achieve what they consider to be price stability. And I'm not even going to get into in this video the fact that as of now, they're defining price stability as an increase in prices, right? Because they're shooting for well over 2% inflation, so that on average you can have 2% inflation, which 2% inflation is still inflation, which is not price stability. It's a price rise. But we're not going to get into that. We're only going to talk about price stability itself and how even that is robbing citizens who hold dollars. Ready? Let's dive in. In order to understand why price stability is theft, first we have to understand what would happen in our economy if the supply of dollars could not change. The M3 money supply right now is a broad metric of how much money there is in the system. It's currently sitting right around 19 or 20 trillion dollars. So let's just use 20 trillion dollars and say, all right, we're going to stop the printing presses here. 20 trillion dollars is all that there can be and all that there can ever be. We cannot create more than $20 trillion. Well, there's really only one thing that you need to do to cause this to happen, and that is outlawing the practice of lending money into existence. We all know that the Federal Reserve prints money, and in fact, that's not exactly mechanically what happens. And I know a lot of you already know that. A lot of you always point it out in the comments of my videos whenever I say that the Federal Reserve prints money. Obviously, we know that that's not the exact mechanics, but that's just kind of how it works out into the system if you don't want to get into the semantics of the thing. But essentially, they don't really print money and create money out of thin air. The Federal Reserve does the same thing that regular banks do in order to create money. They lend money into existence. So if you look at a commercial bank, what they do is, let's say they take $100 deposit from you. They'll be able to take that $100, since you have $100 deposited with them. They can take, let's say, $90 of that and loan those $90 out to somebody else. Now, that $90 loan can't be called at any time, but your $100 deposit can be withdrawn at any time. So you could go to them and you could take out your whole $100. Well, if these are the only two transactions that happen, well, the bank is going to go under, right? That's going to be a mini run on the bank because you gave them $100, you go back to get it, they say, oh, we only have 10, we lent 90 of it out. You're going to say, well, screw you, give me the 10, and the bank shuts down because they're insolvent now. But obviously there's not just two players in the system, and so the banks repeat this process over and over and over. But what happens to that money that's lent out? All it does is go into another bank account. When you go get a mortgage, you're borrowing money that has been lent into existence, and that money that you borrow for the mortgage, that goes to the bank account of the person or the company that you bought that house from. And then when that person or company gets that money in their bank account, they use that to pay their employees or buy a new home. And every time one of these transactions happens, that's just money going into somebody else's bank account. And then every time money goes into somebody else's bank account, that new bank that gets that new deposit has the ability to turn that into a new loan. This is called fractional reserve banking, and it allows banks to create money out of thin air. You don't have to just lend out money that you already have in your vault or that somebody else deposits. For every dollar that's deposited, you can loan out $10 or $100, and that's an expansion of the money supply. And the way the Federal Reserve creates money is essentially the same process. They're just lending mainly to the United States government. So the United States government says, hey, we want to borrow some money. Anybody want to lend us some money? The economy's already tapped out, so the Federal Reserve steps in and says, hey, we'll create a bunch of money and we'll loan that to you. It has to go through the banks, but that's the process. And so the Federal Reserve and commercial banks all expand the money supply via fractional reserve banking and lending money into existence. So really the only requirement is that process and that practice has to stop. So what happens next? Let's say that stops and now we're capped at $20 trillion. You might be thinking immediately that money would start to concentrate in the hands of few. Right? There are some extremely productive people in our society who have already demonstrated a great capacity to create, produce, and accumulate massive amounts of wealth. And if you know how to create wealth, and if you know how to make money, and you have the experience of actually doing that, then you are already better at making money than somebody who isn't there yet. Which means that the richer you get, the easier it is to get even more rich. To he who has, even more will be given, and to he who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And so on the surface, many people look at this and think, man, this would be a terrible thing to happen because the wealth would just instantly start to concentrate into the hands of a few. First of all, that's true. But second, that's what's happening today. It's not the lack of monetary expansion that causes wealth concentration. In fact, what I'll show, it's actually the opposite. And here's how. Money does not equal wealth. Money is like the number of slices in a pizza. Wealth is like the actual amount of pizza. Wealth is the amount of actual goods, services, products, and things that you can get. Whereas money just represents the division of all of the wealth. And so if you have a large pizza with 8 slices in it, do you get any more pizza by turning that into 16 slices? No. So if you have an economy with $20 trillion worth of stuff, do you get any more wealth by turning that into $40 trillion worth of stuff? No, all you did was double the money. You still have the same amount of actual stuff, and now it just takes double the amount of dollars to equal that same amount of wealth. What the government does right now to kind of hide that and sneakily make it look like there's actual growth from printing is that they take tiny fractions of purchasing power from each dollar. Said another way, they take tiny slices of pizza from each slice of pizza and make one new big slice, and then they assign that out somewhere. And so they print a bunch of money, and the only reason that has purchasing power is because they took a little bit of purchasing power from every existing dollar, then they assign those dollars out to whoever they feel they want to. And so printing or monetary expansion cannot produce wealth just the same as cutting extra slices into a pizza cannot create more pizza. So then I have to ask you this, what happens if the number of dollars decreases? Well, it's the opposite of inflation. It's deflation. Instead of it taking more dollars to buy the same amount of stuff, now it takes less dollars to buy the same amount of stuff. When the number of dollars in the system decreases, things get cheaper. Okay, now, assume nothing has changed except that things have gotten cheaper. Is your life better or worse? It's far better. If the cost of groceries goes down, if the cost of rent goes down, if the cost of gas goes down, if the cost of electronics goes down, if the cost of cars goes down, if the cost of any healthcare, education, if it goes down, who benefits? You, the consumer. You get richer when things get cheaper. You get more for less. Okay, now, what happens if there's somebody over here who's hoarding dollars? The big evil billionaires who just keep on accumulating more and more dollars and taking them out of circulation. There's a finite supply now. There's only 20 trillion. So what if they keep on accumulating them? 100 billion, 150 billion, 200 billion, 250 billion. They keep on accumulating and hoarding more and more dollars. What does that do to the rest of the dollars in the system? It makes dollars more scarce. They're taking money out of circulation, out of the supply. That's decreasing the quantity of money that everybody else has. If everybody else altogether has less money, you get deflation. Dollars go further. You have less slices in the pizza representing the same amount of pizza. Less dollars representing the same amount of wealth. Dollars go further. Things get cheaper. Your dollar's worth more relative to the stuff. That means in an economy where you have certain players hoarding wealth, pulling money out of the system, it actually makes everything cheaper and it makes other people richer. Now, what's another consequence of things getting cheaper? I already said your life gets better, but whose life gets worse when things get cheaper? The person selling the stuff. Revenues of companies selling the products that people want go down, which means that in an economy with a fixed supply of money, you have deflation not only of goods and services, you have deflation in asset prices, which means that it's actually harder for the rich to stay rich than it is in an inflationary environment. In an inflationary system, wealth flows through the expansion of money from the poor to the rich. In a deflationary system with a fixed supply of money, wealth flows from the rich to the poor as life gets cheaper and revenues and profits drop. Now, is this a fix for inequality? Absolutely not. But it's a hell of a lot better of a system than the one that we have today. This is why I do not understand the debate that goes on between gold bugs and Bitcoin hodlers. If we return to a system of sound money, it is going to be amazing for everybody involved. The periods of history where countries go through deflation, long periods of deflation when the supply of money is fixed and sound, you experience a growth in wealth, a growth in real wages. Despite nominal wages dropping, people actually experience growth in real wages. Cost of living falls faster than their wages fall. And in a world of finite resources, the only way to move forward and the only way to experience prosperity long term is to get more for less, not an inflationary system where you're constantly getting less for more dollars. You ruin economies and you ruin countries that way. So that is what would happen if the supply of dollars couldn't change, but we know that that's not going to happen. As long as dollars are being used, they will continue to exploit the fact that dollars are being used and print more of them to give themselves the purchasing power that they want when they want it for their own purposes, whatever they deem necessary. And at some point, that game will run out and nobody will accept dollars anymore. And when the military and government employees and American citizens and countries around the world no longer accept dollars as payment, the game is over. But by that time, it will be far too late to transition your wealth into whatever that next form of money is, which if history is any guide, anytime the reserve currency goes through a phase like this, where it starts being diluted in purchasing power very rapidly, and increasingly so over time, the people on a decentralized basis, long before the final nail in the coffin is driven, have already started to use sound money again. And normally throughout history, that has been gold. It could be Bitcoin. Who knows? That's why I buy both. Because Bitcoin's total supply of 21 million can never be increased. It is sound money. Same with gold. Gold cannot be created without labor or capital. It needs to be extracted from the earth and refined, which means that for all of human history, despite the incentives to get your hands on more gold, the rate of inflation of gold has always been about equal to the population growth, about 1.5%, and it's never even exceeded 2%, despite the incentives to get more gold. So either way, they're both sound money, and if either one of those is the money of the future, it will be a prosperous future of widespread growth and wealth for everyone involved. And if you don't have either, check out all my resources. I've got all my recommended resources linked in the description below. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.